Yu-Gi-Oh! A game that is very annoying. I mean, it has its moments, but most of the time, it makes me question why I even play the game. There are a couple things I could rant about, like the win effects and how they miss timing and everything, and also fake restrictions. But today, we're going to talk about a different problem and a possible solution to it. The problem we all know and love, power creep, and the simultaneous abundance and lack of it. Now, question to those who play or have played a game. Have you ever had a deck, or still have a deck, that is your favorite, right? You love it, maybe you watched it in the anime, and it just became your favorite and you just had to make it, right? But then you played it, brought it in real life, and you just weren't doing good with it. Not because of you, but because the deck just wasn't that good, like the pet decks, like for example, my favorite deck is Sacred Beast, but you're not going to be seeing it being played much. I mean, the closest thing is like, Dark Beckoning Beast being played in the Yugioh deck, and sometimes in Sprite because it's a level 2. So that's really the closest you're going to get. And I believe the reason why these decks aren't that good are just, obviously power creep is a problem here, but sometimes Konami just, for some reason, doesn't want to make a good deck, Right? Like, think about it. We have decks like Cash Tier and Tier Limits, Snake Eyes and Sprite, Branded and Sword Soul, right? Pretty good decks, I would believe, right? But why is it that these decks are getting made? These decks that are like, that have power crept other decks, right? But at the same time, we're getting decks like Tistia being made, Like, who's playing that? When was the last time you even heard someone said, well, actually, when was the first time you heard someone say that Tistina was a good deck? And this is the problem. Yu-Gi-Oh! Players have constantly complained about power creep, and they're right to do so. But I find it even more infuriating that we have such bad power creep with cards like Cashier or Fenrir, but at the same time, they're releasing cards like You're Finished. Like, have you seen a single person use this card? Do you even know what card I'm talking about? Like seriously, does a picture even come into your mind right now? Like, I know one guy personally who asked for the card, but only because he thinks it looks cool, not because he's actually gonna play it, Obviously, we're in a game, right, with a lot of cards, right? And there have been multiple times before where a card maybe isn't good on release, but is later on, right? But I don't know. I don't think Your Finish is gonna be one of those cards, Unless I do it. Maybe I finally make that Uriah deck I always wanted to make, And maybe Your Finish is like the magic card that would glue the whole thing together or something. I don't know. If that does happen though, just saying, you got me to think. Now, I remember when a lot of people started saying that, like, oh, Konami should just reboot the game, right? Start from scratch and fix things so we don't have this power creep problem. But I don't think that's right. We have over 10,000 cards in this game now. We've gone too far to turn back, all right? We're in too deep now. So I was thinking like, okay, well, what are things we could do really to fix this problem? And then I was reminded of something I heard once before. And then I was like, oh, it's so clear now. Yeah, the solution is so simple. Yu-Gi-Oh! Should be more like the 2009 Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer.
And a Genix deck has more use in this world than you do.
Oh yeah, that's funny coming from the guy who's 2 and 5.
Shut up, Kurt.
Shut up, man, shut up! Alright, who's ready to get their God. Man, shut your big up, man. Man, we invited this Fire King.
Trust me. Listen, trust me. I know what I'm talking about. Maybe. Sometimes. I don't know. And now let me explain, right? I heard that the multiplayer was busted, right? But because of that, it's considered one of the best multiplayers, right? One of the most fun multiplayers, right? It's because every weapon in that game was viable. Meaning that if you play COD, sometimes the meta changes, right? But usually it's with some assault rifle or some shotgun, right? But in this game, you can use any gun. You can go into an assault rifle fight with a pistol or a knife, and you could still do good. Now, obviously, you're not guaranteed to do good, right? But I think it's a good thing that maybe one game, you can do terribly with it, but in the next, you could just do really good with it, Maybe it's showing more it's more based on just the skill of you, the player. So it's not like the weapon can't keep up. And like I said, I think it's pretty simple, right? This is what Yu-Gi-Oh! Needs. The reason why power creep is so bad and why tier 0 formats keep happening is because Konami just makes 1 or 2 really busted decks, and then they make 3 mediocre ones. And they just have that formula, and then they repeat it each time. But they want to make money, right? Like, oh, we got to sell the product, so how do we do that? We got to make the next one even better than the last one, so we got to make some really busted cards, man. No one's gonna want to buy this if the last set was even better than this, so I don't know. Just make the card that just summons itself from deck, and banishes everything. So my proposed solution is you just make every deck busted. Think about it, right? This would make it so that every deck has a chance against every other deck. No longer gonna have times where maybe you come in like to a locals or any other kind of tournament, right, with a deck. Your opponent plays one card and you're like, oh, well, that's it, well, can't keep up. Or not even can't keep up, just like, oh, well, the deck can't beat it, You're going against a deck that only like 2 other decks could possibly beat. So I think it's important to make it so that every deck has a chance, because one, that could help budget players, who can't afford these decks. Like, for example, the Snake Eyes engine, which I heard is like getting up there to like quadruple digits, which is crazy. But it's also for, the people who just have their little pet decks, and they want to bring that competitively and actually, do pretty good with it. Because don't get me wrong, right? I understand that like the game's all about fun, right? And I think you can have fun while losing, right? But no one likes to lose, especially when it's like, oh, you're coming in with your pet deck and the person just shows up with, their 10-minute tier 1 combo deck followed by a shifter. Another thing this would do is it would let the game be more diverse. And I know recently we just had like a diverse format, right? And that started a whole debate too about whether or not that was a good thing. But I just saw it as like quote unquote pro or competitive players being mad that they actually have to use their brain in matches now because their 10-sided cards don't beat the rogue deck they're up against, right? Like, I don't think it's a good thing when people say to your game, like, there are too many options to play here. I can't prepare for it. I'm sorry, bro, but like, again, we're in a game with 10,000 cards. You got to think, like, if it's not, then that doesn't sound like that'd be a good thing. Like how it's not a good thing that people use the word fair as a negative in this game, That's also not a good thing, which by itself could also be another problem we could rant about, but let's just try to stay on topic, all right? So many tangents I could go on. Anyway, so I propose a solution, but how do we execute this, right? Like, how do you bring every deck up to speed? Well, first and foremost, just have Konami make every new deck as good as the last. Like, I feel like that's not that hard to do, I'm sure they have playtesters. I'm sure they can find out which ones are good. Another thing to do, which is like the big thing they should do here, I believe, is keep supporting old decks, but you need to do this like better. Like with the Yugioh stuff, right? They made pretty good support for it. But let's be honest, right? Not every new support card is going to be played, right? Or is going to be considered good for the deck, especially the TCG exclusives, right? I mean, I don't know what they're doing with those. They mostly make bad ones than good ones with those, but that would still leave, the hundreds of decks already made behind. So how about this? For about half a year to a year, maybe longer, who knows, right? Konami only puts out support for all the archetypes that need it. Like, imagine this entire time, right? The only things that are getting printed are like support cards for the older decks, and then maybe like TCG exclusives every now and then. But other than that, they don't really print out any new cards, like new archetype kind of stuff. Now, that sounds like that'd take a lot of time, right? And how do we decide on what decks need it? I think we can establish a baseline somewhere, right? The decks that win YCSs and regionals, I don't think they would need support, right? Or at least if they win it most of the time or consistently topping, Decks that are like, obviously that's tier 0, tier 1. Tier 2, I think they're pretty fine too. Maybe give them 1 or 2 if they really need it, But tier 3, if we consider that the start of rogue decks and under that, is where we really need all the support. I think, let's say you give all old decks a minimum of 5, right? But maybe no more than 8 unless they really need it, Because I'm sure there's some decks that could really benefit from 8, maybe even 9 or 10 cards. Maybe even just take the whole archetype and just kind of reboot it, I think that'd be okay. Very few need that, I think, but some good. But like, they start giving out some numbers for this, right? The most recent set, as of me recording this, is Phantom Nightmare, which is a core set. That means there are 101 total cards in this set that you can get. That's a lot. Just using that, right? And the lowest number of support cards being 5, that'd be 20 different archetypes being supported just in a core set, right? Now, obviously there are other sets with less cards, right? But again, still going off of this whole minimum of 5, I still feel like we can get through it pretty fast, That's why I feel like, half a year to a year of doing this, and they release like a set every month too. I feel like we can get through it. Now, I also think that during this time, they should also be reprinting staples, right? Like, you don't need to do a rarity collection. They could do something like, oh, this set, while having these support cards, also might have all the Ghost Sisters in it too. Maybe the next set has like a bunch of the pot cards, And maybe the next one has a bunch of generic extra deck monsters. And they could reprint the old cards for archetypes, right? For example, right? Let's say new set, right? They print out a couple of new Amazonas cards, but maybe also in that set, there are reprints of Amazonas, Princess, and Queen in there. Some cards could really use some reprints, but I don't know, maybe put the reprints in the OTS packs, because then maybe they'll actually be worth getting, Like, those packs suck. I don't understand why they even decided to do that. 3 cards, and they're usually just the same thing every time too. Like, literally the same 3 in the same order. And that just genuinely upsets me. It really does. But yeah, I believe that making it so that every deck is on the same level would make the game, slightly more fun to play and would keep more people playing the game too. But let me know what you think about the idea, especially if you're a competitive player or a Yugi tuber who's watching this for some reason. Do you think it's a bad idea? Do you think it's a good idea in concept but not in execution? How would you solve the power scaling problem? Just leave comments to any of those questions down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video too. And thanks for watching. All right, bye.
I'm not lowering myself down to your level just to kick your butt, loser.
Dude, you're so bad I can beat you playing digital bugs.
Come on.
Well, if you're so confident, why don't you just duel him then, since it'd be so easy?
I'm sorry, did someone here ask for an idiot's opinion? Because I know I didn't.
I'm just saying.
I don't care what you're just saying.
If you
no
would
one
be
here
so
asked for
easy,
your
why don't you
opinion,
just do
okay?
it?
So just shut up, because no one cared.
And change your batteries, you fat night.